we got some treats for week 9 of fantasy football. Some players that we think could deliver big fantasy goodies. Before you start setting your fantasy lineup, you're going to get your picks in on Underdog. For some reason you haven't tried Underdog yet, go ahead and do it. Download the app, go to underdogfantasy.com, and you get this free pick as a new customer. CJ Stroud just needs 1 yard. You get that pick, you win. Pick the higher on 0.5 total yards for CJ Stroud. And if you are new to Underdog and you use code ENDGAME when you sign up, you also get up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash in your account. So try it now if you haven't yet. So which players will be treats in your fantasy lineup this week and could possibly go boom? Chris, who's first?
First for me is another Chris Olave. I think Chris Olave is in what I call the perfect storm for a wide receiver to just deliver a ton of fantasy points. First of all, no competition for targets here. You look last week, he had 13 targets. Alvin Kamara, the running back, had 10. No other pass catcher had more than 4 targets. Number 2, he's on a team that can't run the football. Remember in weeks 1 and 2 when it looked like Alvin Kamara was like back in his prime and the offensive line looked great? Yeah, that was a total illusion. That was a mirage. That is not real life. This run game has been horrible since week 2. Number 3, the defense can't stop anybody. Everybody puts up points against them. Everybody scores a ton of points. So they're always forced to throw the ball over and over again. That is a perfect storm for a wide receiver to go off. And then you add in the fact that this week he gets the Carolina Panthers, who are allowing the 8th most receiving yards in the NFL this year. He's coming off a 100-yard game with Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener at quarterback. Now he gets Derek Carr back, and I know Derek Carr isn't Patrick Mahomes or anything, but he's better than those guys. So I know he's been kind of disappointing most of the season, but man, after what he did last week and what he's got going on this week, I think you got to start him.
Well, nothing too surprising here for this one. James Cook, you got him. You're probably starting him anyways. I think you have no doubt you got to start him this week. Could have his best game of the season because he gets the Dolphins. The last time he faced the Dolphins, he had his best game so far of this season, and this time it's in Buffalo. So I kind of just want to rip the Band-Aid off, get this out of the way. Yes, the Bills will win this game, and they'll probably win big. The Dolphins have not won in Buffalo for several years. Josh Allen just owns the Dolphins, okay? I have no problem admitting that, but James Cook was the one who really did the owning in that game. 3 touchdowns. And this is not just an aberration. James Cook has been solid. In fact, you know what? Forget solid. He's been great all year, and people just haven't acknowledged it. In fact, he's the RB8 in terms of overall fantasy points. He's averaging 4.6 yards a carry, which is down from his career average of 4.9. He's always been a good runner, just wasn't getting involved enough. And this year, under new OC, which took over, midway through last year, and we finally saw this full transition to the offense that wanted to run the ball more, and they're running the ball more, and James Cook has been great. The Dolphins' run defense has not been great. They give up 4.5 yards per carry, bottom 10 in terms of run defense against fantasy running backs, and they've allowed 11 touchdowns to running backs. That's the second most, and of course 3 of them came against James Cook. Why would he not score at least 1, maybe 2? Well, maybe he'll go for 3 again. Look, James Cook is a no-doubter this week. You've got to start him. If you like this video, feel like we're helping you out, you can help us out, hit the like button and subscribe. We definitely appreciate that. All right, let's turn back to another running back who could go off this week.
Yeah, speaking of a running back who's been good this year, and I don't feel like people really realize it, is Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has looked great pretty much every single week that he's been healthy this year. And look at him in week 8, he played 92% of the snaps. Like nobody plays 92% of the snaps anymore. And he got every single touch in this backfield. Ty Chandler, completely invisible. That's his Halloween costume this year, the Invisible Man. Because it was all Aaron Jones in week 8. And now he gets a Colts defense that has allowed over 100 yards in all but 2 games this year to running backs. And they're allowing over 4 receptions per game to running backs, which is great for Aaron Jones because that's one of the areas he really excels in. And even though he's an older running back, he looks great this year. He still has plenty of juice. He's averaging almost 5 yards per carry, and he's 11th in explosive runs among all running backs this year. And he's also 5th in yards after contact per attempt. So it's not like he's just living on volume. This guy could get, not incredible volume and still go off for your fantasy team, but he's getting every touch in this backfield. And now they're back at home against the Colts team starting Joe Flacco. I highly doubt this is going to be a game where they're coming from behind like last week against the Rams. I'm going to think it's going to be much more competitive, if not them playing with the lead. Aaron Jones, I know he didn't come through for you last week. Give him another chance. This is a big bounce back spot.
Well, believe it or not, going to go with another running back. That's just how this year has gone. We can rely on running backs more than wide receivers. Go figure. One of the more reliable running backs as of late has been DeAndre Swift, also a guy you may not realize has been as good as he has because we're really focused on how bad the Bears' passing offense is at times, especially last week against Washington. And of course, the play everybody's talking about, the wannabe homage to Refrigerator Perry that turned into a fumble by an offensive lineman who got the handoff at the goal line in the fourth quarter with the game on the line. Yeah, that's Shane Waldron for you, the offensive coordinator. So as much flack as he's getting, he definitely deserves it. I've got to think that with all of that going on and everybody all over him calling for him to be canned, I think he's just got to get back to the basics here and just give the ball to DeAndre Swift. And look, he's been getting the ball. He's been their bell cow for the most part. Maybe he actually gives him the ball near the goal line this time. DeAndre Swift has been so good. Why are you not giving him the ball? 129 yards on the ground just last week. He was the offense. And so it just stands to reason they're going to give him the ball more. He's been so good. I feel like against Arizona's lackluster rush defense, this is another big Swift game. Maybe even bigger. It's actually amazing that Swift is being able to score in 4 straight games despite Rashawn Johnson being there and the questionable play calling. But I gotta think that he just gets more involved, maybe even as a receiver in this game. All right, now let's dig a little bit deeper into the candy jar and see some possible booms that are a little under the radar.
Yeah, I don't know if Courtland Sutton is necessarily under the radar anymore, but he's probably not a guy you think you need to start every week, but you got to start him this week, coming off his first 100-yard game last week. And now he gets the Baltimore Ravens, who are dead last against wide receivers this year. And last week, they were missing 2 of their top corners, Nate Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey. Not sure if they're going to play this week. Obviously, we'll have to see as the week goes on. But if they're out again, that just makes this matchup even better for Courtland Sutton. And what I love about Courtland Sutton in this matchup, yeah, the Ravens give up points to every wide receivers, but they're especially bad to outside wide receivers. They are allowing the most fantasy points to outside wide receivers of any team in the NFL. Courtland Sutton plays on the outside 85% of the time. He's in that Cedric Tillman role, and we just saw what Cedric Tillman did to this defense last week. Why can't Courtland Sutton do that this week coming off that monster game? Bo Nix actually looks good passing the football right now. They're not going to be able to run the ball because A, they can't run it, and B, it's Baltimore. They're going to have to throw the ball. They're probably going to be losing this game. This is going to be another big Courtland Sutton game. And I'll tell you what, even if you don't have Courtland Sutton, or if you don't need to start Courtland Sutton, you might want to take advantage of his pick'em on Underdog. It's still sitting there at 51.5 receiving yards like it was on the wide receiver video. Take the higher on that. Pair the Sutton line with that CJ Stroud free pick, and that's an easy win right there. Just make sure you use promo code ENDGAME when you join, because you're also going to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash that you can use right away.
Well, Ladd McConkey, not under the radar anymore either. He's starting to break out. It was just a matter of time. Like, I actually called the breakout game 2 weeks ago and it didn't quite happen. Last week, it did. I think he does at least what he did last week, maybe even better if that's possible. I'm sure it is. Okay, so last week, 6 catches, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So for fantasy purposes, okay, maybe he doesn't top that, but why can't he do even better in terms of receptions and yardage? Touchdowns, hard to predict, but look, Ladd McConkey has not only clearly established himself as the number 1 target for the Chargers, but gotta like the fact that the Chargers offense is starting to pass the ball more. And now McConkey, the rookie, has become comfortable, and I'd say a little bit more than comfortable. He is one of the more efficient separators at the slot position, and this matchup is actually much better than it was last week for him. Ladd McConkey is a receiver who is beating man coverage at a better rate than anybody other than Justin Jefferson. He averages 4.18 yards per route run against man. Only Justin Jefferson is higher. And the Cleveland Browns, who is his opponent this week, they just happen to play man at the 3rd highest rate, 41.8%. So this is a match made in heaven for him. He's just getting open at a higher clip. They're passing it to him in a better position. So it's not like this is some big bump that is unsustainable. He might actually have more targets, more receptions, more yardage, and that's more goodness for you. All right, Chris, let's keep going. You got another running back in mind?
I do. I've got Tony Pollard in mind. He's currently 6th among all running backs in expected fantasy points. He's got the 11th most carries of all running backs and the 8th most targets of all running backs. It's his backfield here, right? Tyjae Spears are saying he might play this week. I don't even care. He's barely going to touch the ball. It's all Tony Pollard here, and he gets a great matchup this week against the Patriots that are allowing the 4th most rushing yards in the entire NFL and are allowing over a touchdown per game. And even last week in that tough matchup when they were getting destroyed and getting blown out, He had 20 carries for 94 yards. Like, they're just going to keep giving this guy the ball because why not? They have no quarterback. They have no passing game. Sorry, Calvin Ridley. Sorry, Mason Rudolph. They have to lean on Tony Pollard. He's got to be most of their offense. But this week against New England, you don't have to worry about them getting blown out because it's going to be Drake May or probably Jacoby Brissett. Either way, it's going to be a low-scoring, competitive game. He's easily going to top 20 touches in this game once again, going to catch passes, and he's going to be able to rip off those big runs against this terrible New England run defense. So Tony Pollard, absolutely one of my favorite kind of under-the-radar, non-obvious running backs this week that I think could boom.
And sometimes things happen midweek that make us change our opinion or position on a player in fantasy, and I got one of those in mind. Josh Downs in Indy now. I think he's a borderline must start because we got Joe Flacco back. That's what we were waiting for. Look, nothing against Anthony Richardson. I want fantasy points. Joe Flacco delivers it, and he delivers them first and foremost to Josh Downs. That's right. In the 3 games that Flacco has started this year, Downs has been the leading receiver for the Colts. He had at least 9 targets every time and 66 yards. That was his low. And he's scoring a couple of touchdowns. 30 targets and 24 receptions over 3 games with this duo. And now he gets the Minnesota Vikings, which are one of the worst still against wide receivers. Downs is going to get you probably double-digit targets, maybe double-digit receptions, the yardage total. I mean, the floor is so high. How can you not start him? This is a guy who was on waiver wires just a week ago. Rightfully so. We were worried about Anthony Richardson. Rightfully so. But you've got to plug him back in, and he could definitely boom. And like always, we promise you a tight end and a quarterback that could go off. Let's start with tight end.
I really like Jake Ferguson this week against the Atlanta Falcons for a couple of reasons. Number one, you look at Jake Ferguson in the 5 healthy games he has played this year. He's had 6 or more catches in 4 of those games. So he gives you a very high floor right off the bat just to start with. Number 2, this matchup against the Falcons is great because they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers, or I guess pass catchers, I should say, out of the slot. Jake Ferguson runs the 4th most routes out of the slot of any tight ends in the NFL. He's going to be in the slot a ton against his defense. He's going to have opportunities here. And we know last year he was such a red zone threat. He's always a red zone threat. And the Cowboys, kind of like what I talked about in the beginning with Chris Olave, they cannot run the football. They have to throw it over and over again. Obviously, don't start him over the no doubt, must start studs. But if you've got a decision like Jake Ferguson and some streaming tight end, just roll with Ferguson this week. He should come through.
And if we're looking for a streaming quarterback who could be a pleasant surprise, this seems a little too obvious. I'm going with Joe Flacco. This is not a guy who's like on trial and has pressure to perform. He doesn't care. He's letting it loose. He's just glad to be out there, and he's going to let it fly. And I already told you it's against the Vikings. I mean, the Vikings are actually somehow worse against quarterbacks specifically than to wide receivers. And they're getting worse. As I mentioned, over the last 4 games, the Vikings have allowed 12 passing touchdowns to quarterbacks. That's 3 per game. You think Joe Flacco can't get 3? I bet you he can, because he's already done that. He's done it a couple of times. In fact, he's thrown at least 2 touchdowns in each of his 3 games that he's played. Now, you look at the yardage, it's a little bit uneven, but really, its schedule has been kind of funky. He went for 359 yards against Jacksonville, which is one of the worst pass defenses out there. And then he went under 200 for the other 2 games, but that was against Tennessee and Pittsburgh, which are both top 5 pass defenses. And so against the Vikings, yeah, I'm in on Flacco, I'm in on Downs, I'm in on Pittman. Let's see, Jonathan Taylor. Is there a Colt I'm not going to be in on this week? Maybe whoever they got a tight end there, because it doesn't matter. But look, the point is, you need a quarterback. Yeah, Matt Stafford was my pick as a waiver wire add to stream. If it's too late for him, just go with Flacco. He might even be better. If you didn't catch all the start sit advice at every position, go back and check it all right here on the Week 9 playlist.